Hello, everybody, to What is on the Tabletop. My name is Symbio Joe. You can call me Joe. And I have a guest with me I'm very excited about because I think he is a hidden treasure of the community. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Don, and I've been in the hobby for a long time, since the 80s, and I'm mostly a hobbyist. So I collect and customize miniatures. I like some of the fluff, but I hardly ever play these days.
But I think a lot of people share that with you. If it wasn't for a hobby club directly opening in my area, I would be doing that too. Just painting away, enjoying the fluff, and yeah, not playing as much.
Yeah,
What I'm s- what I'm so
I'm,
exciting about is what are you doing? Because I give it a little story before when I started. Not exactly when I started, but it was around 2006, and online forums were a big thing. And I was looking around, and I saw someone making scratch built Warhound Titans for the actual Warhammer 40k scale. And not even was he scratch building a Warhound Titan, he was also making resin molds so he could. I think he made up to three of them, just resin molds, and those are really huge models in comparison. And I saw a lot of resin casting, well, hobby resin casting, and now the 3D printing is on the rise. But you are still working very, very traditionally. Would you please explain what you do?
um, well, I come from a background of doing a lot of metal work, a lot of jewelry, silversmithing, and in particular, I have worked a lot with lost wax casting. And a few years ago, just experimentally, I learned that people were doing a lost plastic casting, and I wanted to see if Games Workshop plastics indeed work for lost wax casting. And indeed they do. What lost plastic casting is, or lost wax casting, is you have your original form, which in this case would be a plastic Warhammer miniature. You would basically add wax to that to give yourself a framework to hold it, and also for metal to flow in, and for the plastic to melt out. You then encase that plastic miniature in plaster. You put it in a furnace, which melts the plastic completely away, which of course is the really scary bit. And then you pour metal into the void, which then gives you a perfect metal replica of your plastic miniature. Basically, it means I can recast a plastic miniature into, in this case, I frequently go with bronze.
So, does that mean that you have an actual mold you can use again and again, or do you have to destroy constantly
N-
plastic miniatures?
no, as I don't want to create copies or replicas of Games Workshop uh, intellectual property.
Yeah, of
This
course.
is a true lost plastic, which means no, there are no molds. The only mold is the plaster mold, which you have to break to get the metal miniature out, which does mean it is an all or nothing process. So you put one miniature in, you get one miniature out, and if something goes wrong, it does mean you lose your miniature. Um, so it is a bit risky, but I think that kind of adds to the excitement of it or enjoyment of it, because you never know until you start breaking the plaster off on whether or not it's worked or not. And there's been some learning along the way, such as green stuff does not burn out well, and neither does the fine cast resin. So you can't use this process with them. It's really got to be the plastics.
That is interesting. Also, very wild. That I did not expect that when you sent me those pictures. I was like, oh my god, he made a mold, and well, in the strict sense of a mold, I did not know that you are, well, burning out the plastic and replacing it with
Yeah,
metal. Um,
yeah, yeah.
Another question that would be if someone. Um, just in theory, would contact you and say, "Here, Don, I have this metal miniature. The company that made it is no longer around," which happens. Could you recreate a classic metal miniature?
I absolutely could. I'm quite sensitive about intellectual property because, of course, people do get quite worked up over it.
Hmm.
But for something that is definitely out of print or something that isn't available anymore, if they wanted to make a new version or a replica, I'd be happy with that. I would strongly suggest that you used a different material so it could not be sold as a original out of print miniature.
Yeah,
If you see my meaning. So,
yeah.
move it to bronze. So you may as well make it something extra special because, of course, bronze is much more long lasting than white metal, and you can indeed paint it if you want. So you can treat it just like a standard miniature.
Yes, you were dropping there a word I wanted you to ask about because I started out in second edition where there was a metal around in which Games Workshop casted their miniatures, and then on the way they switched to white metal. What was that all about?
White metal basically is the term now for lead-free pewter. Usually, it's an inference. It's basically pewter, um, but white metal is basically going to be predominantly tin, frequently with a bit of bismuth or zinc even. But it's going to be a lead-free pewter, really, and it's just called white metal in the industry because pewter still has a lot of negative connotations because people immediately think of lead.
Ah,
But
interesting.
yeah, and
Okay.
of course, white metal is very soft, so easy to bend, easy to pose, which has its pluses, but also means easy to break.
Yes, and I guess everyone had those mostly bent swords or lances or
Yeah,
something in
yeah,
that
yeah,
direction.
yeah,
They were especially lances. I think they were
yeah.
not happy about that they broke off or
And
um.
of course, with the white metal, much more difficult to repair. So gluing a broken lance back together or a sword back together, very tough. You'd usually have to drill and pin it. So drill a hole, put a steel pin in, and then work the two bits together and glue them. So yeah, a real hassle when it broke. Which is why the plastics are so nice. They do allow for so much customization these days. Which of course is my favorite aspect of the hobby. I really like to customize my miniatures. So my bits box is huge.
Yeah,
So
uh, I collect I my hobbies life in quotation started 1997, yes, and
wow,
took a huge break in 2007, and then I started again. And in 2007, I had two huge boxes of bits I accumulated over the times, and I did not even sort them out. I just uh, put them on eBay. Those are boxes. This is how huge they are. They are full of bits. This is how much they weigh. Just bid away. And yeah, now I'm 3 years when the new Gene Stealer cult started out. I was reeled back in like the weak-minded fool I am, and now I have a huge bits box again. Oh, and I don't think I'm cheating just to not call it my pile of shame because I really do not intend to paint all these miniatures, but I just want to have this yeah, a little warehouse of bits I can grab out. I can grab stuff out because I'm scrolling a lot through Instagram and see awesome conversions, and I want to do them myself. Sometimes I actually do have an idea of my own and make one. And
I've really enjoyed looking at a lot of your conversions, especially you did not that long ago a batch of aquatic gene stealers, which I thought were just fantastic, man. I really like those a lot. I've always been a huge gene stealer and Tyranid fan. Because I feel that they're the easiest to customize because you've got so much freedom. Because you can just throw on more legs, less legs, and throw on tentacles, fins, horns, spikes. It all goes.
yes,
But yeah, I really liked your aquatic gene stealers. I thought those were genius, really nice.
thank you very much. I was not so convinced myself, to be honest. Well, actually, the ones I did the most green stuff work with have the most positive response, while the ones that are quick and easy, not that much. But I love them a little bit more because well, when you do an easy conversion, there is not as much room for error, and you're much proud of the work in the end.
Yeah,
And all these sculpted ones, I'm like, yeah, they're okay, but I know where my mistakes are because I'm a
yeah.
true novice to the art form. I follow a Canadian hobbyist by the tag of Modern Synthesist, who also does amazing work, and I'm learning by watching him. And yeah, he's a cool guy. He encourages modeling, tries to teach modeling, and this is where the main bulk of my motivation to do such stuff comes from.
For me, I've always been a sculptor. I've always liked making little monsters and little creatures. So for me, it was always it's always been about the minis. It really has. And I remember getting my first Gene Stealer way back when like I said, would have been I think probably the late '80s, and it was love at first sight. And ever since then, I've always. I mean, I've got a smattering of all sorts in my collection. I have, a little bit of everybody, but I definitely have the most in the way of the Tyranids. And recently, I've really been working on putting together a little Gene Stealer cult warband or kill team. Just a nice visual group, not really made for play. And at the moment, I'm working on a couple of my favorite aberrants, and yeah, really, I enjoy them a lot. I think they're really a lot of character in the Gene Stealer cult models, and also you can really mix and match all sorts of parts from, you get the Imperial Guard parts, you get some Tyranid parts, you can really get a good range of diversity and interest in your models. A lot of character, like I say. One of my problems is I'm trying to convert I think he's called the Gellermorph, the little dude with the pistols. He's got
Yes,
three
I know.
pistols. And he's got a really nice Western feel, and I'm trying to make a
Yes,
good hat. I really want him to have a hat, and
hats
I've
are
been
important,
working on
people.
trying. Yeah, and I've been trying to get a decent looking hat on him, and I can't come up with anything that makes me happy, because I think he just needs a torn up, bullet ridden sort of a cowboy hat to go with his look. I'm also trying to sneak another arm on there because I want him to have four arms, because all my main sort of heavy characters, I'm sneaking, making sure they have the full complement of four arms, even if one of them's really tiny, a little misshapen thing, because I want to have that sort of a link that makes him a bit more special, a bit more sort of close to the hive, if you see what I mean. And yeah, I was trying to see if I could sneak a tiny arm with a holdout pistol somewhere, but no luck yet.
It is a nice idea indeed. The more I think about it, just well, you have those little pistols that have just two barrels or one barrels of the so-called Lady Colt.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it would be a good. Well, I I think you are onto something when you keep going with the hat because, well, I I can already picture it. Not so much a bullet-ridden hat, but some sort of cowboy hat would fit him quite
Mm.
perfectly, I think.
Well, I think it needs to at least have one good bullet hole in it that either looks
Yeah.
like it was a close call for him, or the reason he's got the hat is because he put a bullet through it, with its original occupant, sort of a
Yes,
type thing. But
that
so it's a bit of character.
I actually I made a kind of swordish Warhammer Quest like 40k game for my friends,
Oh,
and
excellent.
everyone was I got a miniature and some stat lines they could improve in and could get some skills they get in a little more in detail rules. It was a commissar, a sniper, and a tech priest, and they were doing some kind of undercover mission against orcs. And I think in the second mission, the sniper did not hit and headshotted the commissar. And from that on, the sniper took the commissar hat with the bullet hole in it and wore it, and it became a running gag of the group. Yeah, the idea that he got the hat from a uh, previous owner is quite funny to me.
Yeah, I just sort of like the image of him, walking up, picking it up, and
Yeah.
deciding it was his now. But
Uh,
I try to get a lot of character, like I say, in my little groups. I'm really inspired by Blanche. I can't remember his full name. He
John,
works with, yeah,
you mean the
uh,
main um,
yeah,
concept artist of GW?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
John
yeah.
Blanche.
John Blanche, yeah,
Yeah.
and so I always love his war bands, and always go for war bands that really look like they are a group that works together and a group that has been together. I love the Mechanicus as well. They were my newest sort of guilty shame, where I have loads of models, piles of models, always a backlog. And I was like, yeah, no new armies. And then all the Skitaris came out, and they just have so many good pieces and so many good parts that I've become obsessed with making like a perfect tech priest. Just for the fact that, yeah, cast in copper or bronze, I think a tech priest would just look magnificent. So I've got several priests, which I've cut to pieces, and I'm now reassembling into what I view as being a perfect tech priest, and we'll go from there.
Um, are you fearing that you are sharpening the blade and sharpening the blade and sharpening the blade and never use it? Is that something that
Uh,
might happen there?
yeah, yeah, I definitely I'm terrible for having a backlog of half done projects. So my box of shame is horrifying because it dates right back to the 80s, and I've got models that I've picked up, I've put together, I've painted, and then almost immediately stripped again, taken back apart, and started reassembling into something else. So there's always a constant evolution and change. And as soon as I'm happy with a project, frequently I'll then revisit it. Although I've gotten a lot better at that in the last few years, and I do tend to move towards a direct result a bit better. So with my Gene Stealer team, I've been pretty good at working on a character, getting them done to a point where I'm happy with it, getting it cast and setting it up. So yeah, getting there. But there's always the next project. I'm working on a homunculus as well, because I do like some of the Drakari models, and so I've been working on a homunculus on and off for ages now, and it's one of those ones that's always in the background. Also, I want to make a good Dark Elder Archon, and so every time I start finishing them off, a new kit comes out that has a piece in it, and think, oh, that would look nice, and so I have to cut another part off the Archon and put a new part on. And the nice thing about casting it in bronze is once it's done, it's done. You can't really back out of it, and so it's a good way to finalize a miniature or a piece.
That is quite the interesting mindset, which is totally alien to me, I have to say, because I rarely strip any miniatures. I think that once I stripped a miniature, and what I actually do, I use almost exclusively the super glue and not the plastic glue that
Ah, yeah.
melts plastic together, because I know sooner or later I might rip a miniature I have done apart because I want to use the bits. I totally feel you on the side of the new miniature output GW does. It is just you start a project and a new miniature set comes out, and now this one is perfect, and you change it again. But I usually find myself completing something, and when it is done, I get the feeling of completion way earlier than some people. Maybe that is not good for me because I don't work very serious on perfection, or it comes to a point where I look at it and I see some mistakes, but I cannot be bothered anymore because I want to do something else, because there are so much other ideas I want to do right now, and
You,
I
you
don't really feel the need to fix it. What is special in your case is that you're basically finishing with a monument to your craft, which I find very interesting, and that is so far away from what I'm doing. Just now it's done, and it is not only done, but I'm making a bronze statue out of it. Well, statue in the widest definition, a brass miniature out of it. It is quite a thing to do. It is very, very interesting.
to be honest, it all started because I had um, a small Tyranid model that I'd made ages ago, and it was out of plastics, but it was really nice, and it kept on getting broken, and eventually a part broke and got lost, and I tried to rebuild it, and then another part got broken, and I was frustrated, and I wanted to make a permanent representation. And that's what led me to try to see if the plastic would indeed cleanly burn out and leave a good mold impression. So it was really trying to immortalize my favorite characters that led me to try it out. And so I've done a few, and certainly have a few more lined up. But I think I sent you a picture of my aberrant, who was the first of the new batch, and he came out really lovely.
He
Turned out
looks,
really, really
yeah,
nicely.
or well, whatever an aberrant is. It looks great, and it looks like the detail is really well caught. Is bronze the go-to medium for a good detail cast, or is there
Uh,
something another metal that would do better?
it depends. I use a high copper bronze, um, and I have my own alloy that I use. Bronze is usually 90% copper and then 10% of something else, frequently tin. I tend to use a mix of around 90 to 95% copper and then 5 to 10% fine silver. because I find silver, which is a bit harder than tin, but holds detail a bit sharper. So my bronze, it tends to be a copper silver mix. Um, but certain metals do tend to be a bit better if you go with a very hot metal. So bronze is a good one for that. It means the metal is much more fluid, so it gets into all the detail better. Make sure your plaster is very, very clean. I use a vacuum to ensure that it pulls all the bubbles off and forces the plaster into all the detail. And of course, in the plaster or in the plastic, before I put the plaster in, I make sure every detail is picked out how I want, and I'll go through and I'll exaggerate stuff. But if you use a vacuum and you're using good plaster, and you get your metal nice and hot, you can pick up surprising detail. On my aberrant, I had taken a scalpel blade and very finely, quickly scraped lines into his loincloth to make it look more like cloth. And those quick scratches I made with my scalpel blade showed up in the bronze and are visible there. So you can pick up really minute detail. That does also mean that it picks up every mistake as well. And of course, fixing mistakes in bronze is a bit more tricky than fixing them in plastic.
I guess so. What just sprang to my mind, which I did not really think about, is the question, is it worth it? Because not only are you losing a plastic model, but I think the price for metals like you use them is constantly rising, isn't it?
It is. If you're using a tin-based copper bronze, or if you're using marine bronze, which is bronze and aluminium, your prices are significantly lower. I also scavenge copper from any source possible. So if anyone has throwing out any sort of wire or pipes, I'll ask for it. And then I refine the copper down myself. Same with aluminum or tin or silver. I collect any scrap that I can and then refine it myself, which saves me a lot of time and effort and money. So, and over the years, I've managed to hoard up a bit of copper and a bit of tin, so that keeps me going. And since they're such small figures, the cost is not too much. It really is. It depends on what you want and what what it's after. I certainly wouldn't recommend making a whole army. But if you have a miniature you really like, it might, for me at least, it's a matter of I want to have this warband that I know is going to stand the test of time. And in 5, 10 years' time, I'll still have that little warband. And if I decide to paint them and strip them and paint them and strip them, of course, bronze is very easy to paint and very easy to strip the paint off without damaging the figure. Whereas with plastics, you can have some trouble stripping the paints off. So it just gives them a lot of longevity.
Yeah, it's quite the way to, yeah, quite the way to go, I think. Well, there are a lot of solutions out there because, well, plastic is now the main medium miniatures are cast in, and there is quite some stuff out there to get rid of previous paint jobs. But I think, yeah, it is quite easy when it is on metal to strip it and get it back to the original state and paint it again. What I was talking about with Tanner, yeah, after the show was, it is um, a different feel of having an actual metal figurine in contrast to a plastic miniature,
Oh,
because
definitely.
I started out, as I said before, in second edition, where you had the mix. You had some plastic and some metal miniatures, and well, depending on the army, the really well big miniatures and meaningful miniatures in quotations like dreadnoughts or special characters, they were always cast in metal, and picking them up and moving them around just had a different feel to it. Like moving a metal dragon is it has a different heft to it. It is some kind of more dreadful in a way.
My once again as an example, my little aberrant in bronze, he's such a gratifying little fellow to pick up and hold, because they're such brutes in appearance, and the added weight really does give him more of a feel and a character to him. As a point of interest, bronze is almost exactly 10 times the weight of plastic. So when I'm working out how much bronze I need to make a miniature, I weigh the miniature in plastic and then multiply it by 10, and that's what I need in bronze. And so the average aberrant I found is around 3.5 grams. And yeah, my cast aberrant is 35 grams. So quite a weighty piece. But yeah, it definitely gives a whole different feel. And even just standing them up, they visually seem to have a much more solid, rooted feel to them. But yeah, I like a metal miniature myself, I guess.
Well, what's not to like about them when you are doing them yourself and you can make sure you're doing them right, or well, repeat the process so often that they are well right.
Mm.
While we are talking about aberrants, I want to talk to you a little bit about fluff and well, the concept of them, because I'm not a fan, to be honest. Um, I just want to hear your opinion first because they are the newest addition to the Gene Stealer cult. Back in the day, there was only neophyte acolytes, the cult makers, the patriarch, well, the purebred strain Gene Stealers, and neophyte acolytes who were a level 1, level 2 psyker.
Overall, well, they've come a long way, because they've changed the lore of the Gene Stealer quite significantly over time, really. And to be honest, I think the modern lore is a much tighter, sort of cleaner, makes more sense. Uh, it works off of a longer period of time, because the old lore was a Gene Stealer would burst out of its host, killing its host, and then they changed it very quickly to the Gene Stealer would burst out of its host without killing its host. Which was quite obscure and weird. Now, of course, they've sort of moved it to an accelerated normal reproduction, which makes a lot of sense in the fluff. And of course, in 40K, it's all a slow game. You look at the lifespans of characters; they span hundreds or thousands of years quite easily now. So I quite like the Gene Stealer threat now being a bit slower, but much more insidious, really creeping into a society. And I don't mind the aberrant. I quite like the idea of a heavy. So you are going to have those mutations, which are going to be definitely caught somewhere in between, and not at all passing for a human and being closer to their Gene Stealer stock, but not having the mental prowess. That said, have noticed, I think, in kill teams, you can have an aberrant as your leader, I believe, which is an interesting thought.
Well, Kill Team is quite interesting in the possibilities. I mean, the four Lictor squad is quite interesting if you want to
Oh,
if you want
that's
to recreate some Predator movie-like feeling. Or well, we just play tested them one, and they wrecked an orc team quite quick. We did not expect them. The plans of the orcs was just to swarm them, but
mm,
the damage output of the lictor itself for 25 points is no joke. They are a force to reckon with. And yes, you can also, I think, have a complete team made out of aberrants. And yes, what what bugs me a bit is the imperfection of aberrants, because I have a very well positive view of how Tyranids work and how they can manipulate a genome. Um, the gene stealers are indeed special because you have a breeding cycle, and if you know about genetics, stuff can go wrong, but that it goes especially wrong to get a creature that is well, a mishap of nature in quotation mark. Do you know the channel 40K Theories?
Yeah, I haven't followed it a lot, but I do occasionally follow some.
He did a piece about them where there it is not quite sure how they come to be because of all the new fluff, and that there's a special gene stealer type that can manipulate the genome, not really explained how and why, and he is the one who gathers the aberrants around him, which makes some more sense. But I think what it appeals to me is that they are indeed a wanted mutation to dig rapidly or just be a more brutish kind of creature. But the question to me is then, why not get the gene stealer, the pure strain gene stealer, to be a much tougher, much well, brutish mutation, and just wait to the point that the host creature develops such a mutation. It is very specific, that thing that bugs me. But I'm looking a lot in well, I'm kind of sortish into genetics, and Warhammer 40k is not very kind to that part of science, to be honest.
No, no.
It
Uh,
is just something I have to, well, bypass and leave it be. But yeah,
because
well,
I definitely see your point. One of the things I would point out is I don't like the aberrants where they've really taken the mutation too far. So if you look at my aberrants, they're pretty clean and really have a strong sort of, you can see it's almost a pure strain. On the one I sent you a photo of, I put an extra rending claw on him, so he does have four arms. He is a bit more symmetrical. His head is much more of a gene stealery head. And I think for me, the way I see the aberrants developing is, of course, it takes a long time and a long effort for a gene stealer to cause a new pure strain gene stealer to be reproduced. It has to go through several generations, where aberrants can crop up quite early. And so I see the production of aberrants as a speeded up process to get a heavy creature out. So to get something that you need for doing extra heavy work, for either carrying heavier items or, as you say, tunneling or digging, or even just to have a heavy combat member. But like I said, I do tend to avoid any of the really. So I don't tend to use the aberrant heads that are put in the kits, because I find them a bit too much. I think, yeah, they don't look beneficial to me. It looks like, and some of the mutations look like they've gone so far that they'd be more of a hindrance to the creature, and I don't see why that would be there. And I think the reason why the reason I put forward for why there's hiccups and irregularities is because it's a greatly sped up process. So it's trying to produce something as heavy hitting as a pure strain gene stealer, but in a fraction of the time. So therefore, you're pushing the host's genetics to its very limit. And since the host genetics is still making up a big chunk of the gene stealer cult, you can only push that so far and get a favorable result. So that's why there tends to be some less than favorable results, perhaps.
Um, you scratched on it earlier, my deep sea gene stealers, and of course, what we are talking about, the great fun of gene stealers is that they can infect different host species
Mm.
with different outcomes. And what really got me way back in the day, we are still talking about 2000, 2005, 2006, was a fellow called Navarro Bugman, who is also on Instagram, which did at the time a biodiversity um, theme in which he took different species and made a gene stealer version out of it.
Oh, fantastic! Because I've often thought about going through the races and popping one out for each. I once was really set on making a Tyranid army that had been trapped on a craft world. So for generations and generations and generations, they'd just been slowly digesting this craft world, but they couldn't get off of it because it was caught in the warp. So it was going to be a race of Tyranids that had been just trapped for generations on a craft world, slowly absorbing it. So becoming, really fine, all very wraith-boned, very, more of an elegant Tyranid force that looked like their whole stuff had been made of the craft world, which of course most Eldar players would probably find absolutely dreadful and horrifying, but I thought would give a really strong image. But I never got around to doing it.
That is a wild and very, very interesting premise. I like it quite a lot. Also, just the elders themselves. Uh, it it is a it is it is an interesting race to absorb as a tyrannid.
Mm,
Um, just not so much for their physical form, but for their
yeah,
enormous
the
psychic powers
yeah.
and strange psychology. And the Wraithbone, there hangs a big question mark in how sentient Wraithbone is and what you can do with it. And there's also I think there's is it a official story? There is a story out there of a gene stealer slash avatar patriarch,
Wow.
which seem I think it is a official story, in nothing that is picked up in a popular way, but I think there was something like it, because
Mm.
well the 40k setting indeed is pretty wild, and the rules of the warp and how it works is pretty wild. Just I think the premise was a Eldarish gene stealer cult,
Mm.
and the kind of soldiers, the manifestation of the cult would be a hybrid of patriarch and avatar. It was quite interesting. Well, the possibilities with Gene Stealers, as we pointed out, are quite interesting, and the stuff Navarro Bachman made was really a wide range. A Snake Gene Stealer he made, a Crude Gene Stealer. I think he still sells Tau Gene Stealers.
Because I've been wanting to do Tau for a while because I have a soft spot for the Tau.
Why? This is the
As far
internet.
as
Explain yourself, sir.
as far as gameplay goes, no. I don't think I could ever bring myself to playing because I really, at the end of the day, when it comes to playing, I very much am a Tyranid player. I tend to run to my opponent as fast as possible and then try to eat them alive. And I found that if I play Tau, I try to do that, which of course doesn't work very well. I just can't bring myself to stand back and shoot. Where my feelings for Tau are is some of the models are just lovely. Visually, a lot of the Tau are just really nice figures. I really like just the standard Tau trooper. I think is a nice looking character, a nice looking figure. And of course, I love my mecha. I love my robot suits. And the stealth suits especially. I love the stealth suits. So for me, and drones as well. So I love drones. I love stealth suits. So for me, I really I can't bring myself to hate the Tau. But I do definitely, some of the miniatures, like I say, really just spectacular. Really nice looking, good clean lines, interesting bits and pieces. Sort of all the best features of the Eldar and the Imperial Guard, really. But yeah, I think when they arrived on the scene, I was sort of like, do we need them? And now they're here. I think they add a nice dimension to the Warhammer universe. I think they look the part. They look nice. It's another faction, another Glasshammer, really, I suppose. Very shooty.
Yes, indeed. I had the pleasure to play against them in ninth edition, and yeah, they are. Um, I well, back in the day, it was the Imperial Army with 3 basilisks and maybe some other assets just standing there and shoot. And I think now the Tau doing a better job of it, but I think yeah, when they fourth or third edition on a tournament, what a friend of mine liked to do, because everybody was expecting Tau to just stand there and well shoot and shoot and shoot until they lost or won. And what he liked to do is just pack a transport, fly his fire warriors in the midst of the fray, and just annihilate a squad and see some of his opponents dumbfounded by this move. Just that. Oh wait, why are these Tau coming towards me? Oh, they have 2 shots now. That's not good.
Yeah, I think it's always good to be unexpected. You certainly get a better advantage if you can use your army in an unorthodox manner. I tend to be fairly traditional. I'm very big on the use cover, sneak as much as possible, get as close as possible, and I tend to stick to that. But every once in a while, I'll throw a gambit in and do something unexpected if I have to. But yeah, I like playing against an unorthodox player. It certainly makes it a lot more entertaining, I think.
Yes, indeed. I quite like that stuff myself. Um, as I recognized with the previous podcast, an hour is not that long, so I want to push a question out real quick before
Sure.
our time runs out. Why do we see so little models on your Instagram? I mean, we see your work. Is there a second Instagram? Do you want to keep it separated, or why?
No, it's just most of the work I show on my Instagram is work that I actually have openly for sale. And the reason I don't put the Warhammer miniatures on is because, number one, Games Workshop pursue their intellectual property in such an aggressive manner that
Yeah.
if I put bronze miniatures up, I know that there's a good chance that they'll approach me. And although I'm not making copies of their work, because it's a one in, one out. So they aren't, there are no molds. They are not losing any revenue. I'm not doing anything that is losing the money. They still might hassle me, so that's why I don't tend to encourage it that much.
So you'd be better safe than sorry.
Yeah, mostly. Like I say, I don't make rubber molds of anything. I don't make reproducible molds. It's all lost plastic. But still, it's just it keeps it down. Also, whenever I've shown them in the past, there's been a lot of interest. But of course, as you did point out, the process being quite in depth and quite drawn out does get expensive. So when people say, "Oh, could you do this mold for this miniature for me?" It's a matter of yes, I can. However, the cost to do it is probably more than what most people are willing to pay for a single miniature. And of course, on top of that, there's the chance that the miniature might be completely lost. If something goes wrong, that miniature is gone, and there's nothing that can be done about that. So, something to bear in mind. So it's a relatively, well, it's a high risk in the fact that if it does go wrong, it goes horribly wrong. And yeah, so it's not for everybody. But for me, since I do it myself, I think it's absolutely worth it. My few bronze figures that I have are definitely some of my favorite things I own, and my aberrants always sort of guard my workstation for me when I'm not about. They're always there, and when I'm thinking or working on a next project, I'm always happy to pick them up and pose them or stand them around. So yeah, it's an interesting process. It certainly gives you a fantastic result when it all goes well. But yeah, like I say, it's certainly not something you would do for a whole army. But for a favorite miniature or something like that, yeah, I think it's worth it. But yeah.
In that context, what I'm thinking about, I see a lot of great conversions and individually made uh, miniatures on Instagram. What would be the process? Just say if I do not care about the money and I have a green stuff plastic miniature that I want to be in bronze, what would I have to do so you can work with it?
Um, uh, Ideally, the best one is if it's all plastic. If it's all plastic, it works best. What I do with mine is instead of using green stuff when I'm customizing a figure, especially for casting, is I use wax to place the part of green stuff. So I use different jewelers' waxes, which work like green stuff, to make anything I need to make or shape anything. For instance, on my next aberrant that I'm doing, he has a little tiny sort of vestigial arm reaching out from under one of his other arms, and I used an arm off of a Gene Stealer familiar. Uh, Fixed it in place, and then I've built up around it using wax to put sort of like a shoulder blade on it, so it blends more with the model. Also, if you look at my bronze, the secondary scything talon, its shoulder had to be rebuilt, so I rebuilt that in wax. Also, the junction of his head onto the aberrant's body, I had to build that up with wax as well. And of course, wax burns out very cleanly. Green stuff frequently leaves ash and residue, uh, and that will cause imperfections in the bronze. So the best thing you can do is, if it is one with green stuff, is we could try to find a way to work around it, either to try to recreate the miniature again using the original plastics and using wax to build it up, or you can risk it. If it's not very much green stuff, we can try to flush it out by making a wax reservoir to flush it out. Um, if it's a miniature that's made out of fine cast, there's not a lot you can do. Those they just don't burn out well at all. They cause a lot of trouble. In which case, if you're trying to reproduce that, there's other ways of going about that. But I don't tend to do that.
So that wax you're working with, well, yeah, of course it is costable. So let's just say I make a silicone mold, pour the wax in, and ship that wax miniature to you. That would be possible.
Oh, that'd be absolutely possible. Yeah, anything you produced out of on your own out of a silicon mold, yeah, if you made it out of wax, or even a lot of the resins these days, some of them will burn out. If you check, a lot of them will say they're suitable for lost plastic casting, or LPA, I think they call it. Um, and yeah, anything that can burn out clean will work fine.
So what are the brands of wax you're working with, or what are they called? Just out of interest.
I frequently use a brown sculpting wax, which is usually used for the bronze making industry. It's very, very soft and sticky, so it's good for doing the sketch work. So for at the moment, one of the projects I'm working on is I'm trying to make a very, very dark Harlequin. And so I'm patching him up using some Drukhari bits and some Dark Elf bits and whatnot. And to hold them together, instead of using blue tack or green stuff, just to sort of tack them together, I use this wax. It also works to make some simple shapes. The downside is it's very soft and very sticky, so you have to treat it very well. But you can mix other waxes with it. You can even use beeswax, which has its limitations, but you can even use beeswax to sculpt with. I usually mix 2 or 3 different waxes together to get the consistency I want. So I go for consistency, sort of like a hard, stiff plasticine in my wax. So that gives me quite a lot of sculpting capability. It means I can put a hard edge into it, but also soften it quite easily.
Mm-hmm. So different polymer clays, green stuff, they have a tendency to be sticky. So, well, you use something fat-based or water to work with them. Would that work with that brown wax, or do you have to do something completely different?
It depends on what you want to do. Once again, you can use spirit-based things to smooth it down, to get a real smooth polished finish. Of course, what I tend to do is I get the finish as close as possible, and then use a pencil torch, very, very gently, very delicately from a distance, and that can
Okay.
give you a perfect mirror polish. Because it just surface melts the wax,
Uh-huh.
which will give you very, very sharp, or not sharp, but very smooth, clean mirror finish. But you can use some, depending on the wax you're using, you can definitely use some mineral spirits, paraffin and whatnot to smooth it down.
That
Another
sounds.
wax I
Yeah,
use is
continue.
called sprue wax, which is a pink wax, and that tends to be quite good. Um, and that would just be a sprue wax. I picked that up from any jeweler supply, really.
Okay, that sounds like a whole other can of worms that are there to open. I myself work with paper, and paper has very sharp edges, which I sometimes forget about, which can lead to nasty cuts. Is in your line of work something one except from the heat, something one should look out for that does not have should not happen to oneself?
Well, when cleaning up the bronze, you're cutting free the sort of the structure that you have to build up around it to give yourself good metal flow, which means using rotary tools and, of course, using a lot of very, very fine jeweler's saw blades. And I found that, yeah, with a jeweler's saw, if you slip, those can be quite horrifying. Certainly an unpleasant surprise. But yeah, it's mostly you've got to be careful with the heat. You're dealing with molten metal, so which is both extremely gratifying to work with, but can also be really keep you really on your toes. And of course, all sorts of little accidents can happen if you're not paying attention. Moisture is one of the worst things. If you have moisture anywhere around when you're pouring metal, if the metal hits it,
Oh
of
God,
course, what
yeah.
happens is, yeah, it turns it to steam, which of course will start throwing the metal back at you, which can be very exciting if it's molten metal.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, it's if you're careful. Thankfully, I tend to not really accrue that many injuries. Anything I do tends to be minor. One of the worst things I'm terrible for is my impatience. As soon as the thing is cast, I want it out of that plaster mold as fast as possible because I want to see what happens. But you can't quench it really too quickly, because if you quench it quickly, you cause a lot of shrink, which happens too fast, which means you can get cracking and splitting, or even strange depressions and shrinkage on your model. So you have to really let it cool down as much as possible, and then sort of chip it out by hand instead of using water to break it up like you normally would. And sometimes I get a bit too eager, and I start chipping away at it when it's still much too
Oh
hot,
god.
and I end up juggling hot plaster in a hot piece.
That sounds like fun.
But once again, I think it's worth it at the end of the day.
Okay,
But
listen, Don, we are
yeah,
nearing the finishing line. I
okay.
think we are having reason enough to do another podcast someday.
I'd be delighted, man. I'd love to have a chat again. That'd be great.
Just as a quick reminder to the listener, where can they find you on Instagram? And maybe if you can give us a sneak peek what we can look forward to.
Uh, well, I think my Instagram is just at Don Sibthorpe, and you can see a lot of the bronze work and ceramic work I do. I mostly make small handheld sculptures, little creatures and whatnot. And one of the other projects I'm working on, as far as the bronze Warhammer miniatures, is I've got a Death Guard that I've been meaning to do for ages, and he's just on the finishing line. I'm hopefully going to be casting him in the next couple weeks, so you might see a Death Guard. If I remember, I'll try to send a couple pictures of him to you as he is now, so you can see what I'm up to. And
Great.
yeah, he was a lot of fun.
I'm looking forward to that. I thank you for your time.
My pleasure, man. It's been really lovely talking to you.
Yeah, looking forward doing this again. I will have another guest, and then I go to the rotation of the three volunteers I have so far right now. I, I see where it goes from there. It is still fun and very exciting. Yeah, I enjoyed this very much. I'm glad you did
So did
too.
I.
And well, until next time, goodbye.
Excellent. Goodbye.